Oh boy, it's raining outside and windy, and that's exactly what I want for this episode because this one is really dark. You thought Bel Gunnis was bad? You thought the Devil's Posse was bad? Guess what? Nope. Check this out. There's a stretch of Kansas prairie where nothing grows quite right. Even today, over 150 years later, people still talk about the land, whispering of bodies buried deep beneath the orchard soil and the screams that used to echo beneath the floorboards of a long-forgotten cabin. Back then, it was just another stop along the Osage Trail, a road that ferried settlers westward past wind-battered trees and into the promise of new beginnings. But if you stopped at the wrong house, if you stayed for dinner with the wrong family, you might never be heard from again. They were called the Benders, a quiet family of German immigrants who lived on the Kansas frontier and ran a modest inn. But the place was a trap, and for the unlucky souls who passed through their door, it would become their final resting place. This is the story of America's first family of serial killers. This is the legacy of the Bloody Bender Inn, where no one leaves alive. Long before the Benders arrived, Kansas was already soaked in blood. The Civil War had torn through the region. Guerrilla fighters, outlaws, and bushwhackers prowled the borderlands, turning Kansas into a battleground for ideologies and vengeance. Even after the war officially ended in 1865, the violence didn't stop. It just shifted. Settlers flooded into the territory under the Homestead Act, eager for land and a fresh start. What they found was lawlessness, ragtag towns, corrupt sheriffs, and miles of nothing but wind and weeds. In Labette County, which I might be pronouncing that wrong, tucked in the southeast corner of the state, most of the new arrivals were immigrants. German, Scandinavian, and Irish. They came with their customs and their accents and their dreams. But they also came with their secrets. There weren't many towns and even fewer lawmen. You could kill a man and vanish into the tall grass before anyone found the body, if they ever did. That was the perfect setting for the Benders. They arrived sometime in 1870 or 1871, records are vague, and the family never filed official immigration paperwork under the same names they used later. The ambiguity alone would become one of the most chilling pieces of the story. They claimed 160 acres of land about a mile north of where the town of Cherryvale would eventually be established. Their property sat along the Osage Trail, the main thoroughfare for wagons, cattle, and travelers heading west. It was an ideal location for a business and a perfect location for a kill zone. And also 160 acres. That is a lot of land, like when you think about it. There were 4 of them. At least, that's what people believed. John Bender Sr., known to locals as Old Man Bender, was a grim, heavy-set man with a thick German accent and a 1,000-yard stare. Obviously, he's out there murdering people. He rarely spoke in town, and when he did, it was like broken English or outright muttering. His wife, referred to only as Ma Bender, was said to be just as severe. Stocky, scowling, and prone to staring. Some claimed she dabbled in herbal medicine and superstition. Others called her a, quote, she-devil behind her back. She was probably just as bad as her husband. I mean, like, if we're going to be honest, here's a whole family of them, right? Then there was John Bender Jr. He was younger than the others, in his mid-20s, tall and blonde. He smiled often and talked too much. People said he had a nervous laugh, the kind that didn't quite match the mood. He claimed to speak fluent English, but often slipped into gibberish or nonsense when pressed. Folks around Cherryvale thought he was, quote, touched in the head. Strange, maybe slow. Touched in the head? I'm going to start using that term for, some people. And finally, Kate Bender. Kate was the face of the family, the honey to the horror. In her early 20s, she was attractive, articulate, and unusually independent for the time. She spoke clear English and advertised herself as a spiritualist and healer. Her posters, printed and handed out across southeast Kansas, offered seances, divinations, and cures for disease. Kate claimed she could speak to the dead. In truth, she may have created more spirits than she ever contacted. The family built a one-room wooden cabin on their land. Inside, they divided the space with a canvas curtain. The front half served as a general store and inn for travelers. The back was their living quarters. There were no neighbors nearby, just tall prairie grass, unpaved trails, and a howling wind. Kind of like what's going on outside right now. That wind and rain, man. Of course, it's going to be creepy while I'm reading this one. The Benders didn't rely on chaos. They killed with routine, with ritual. Here's how it worked. According to accounts reconstructed from witness testimonies, survivor statements, and the horrifying discoveries made after the family vanished. A traveler would arrive at the inn, maybe weary from the trail, maybe just looking for a place to eat or rest for the night. Kate Bender, charming and gracious, would greet them, offer food, and a place to sit. The guests would be guided into a chair at the dinner table, a very specific chair. It was placed directly in front of the canvas curtain, with their back to the fabric. So like, I'm here, boom, curtain, right? And then like, my dog decides to come up and like, lick me in the face or something. While Kate distracted the guest with conversation, flirtation, maybe even a spiritual reading, one of the men, usually John Jr. or Sr., would creep silently behind the curtain. Then came the hammer. With a brutal strike, the back of the guest's skull would be crushed, sometimes with a sledgehammer, sometimes with a blunt iron rod. The body would then be dropped through a trapdoor built directly beneath the chair into a shallow, blood-soaked cellar below. Once in the cellar, the victim's throat would be slit, usually by Ma Bender, to ensure death and drain the body of blood. Dang, dude, they're frickin' brutal, bro. From there, the corpse was either buried directly in the cellar or dragged out back and buried in the orchard behind the house. The trapdoor was concealed with a rug. The chair, often referred to later as the death chair, okay, get out of my way, was bolted to the floor. This wasn't improv. This was an execution system. Imagine like burying the bodies directly like in the basement. You're gonna run out of space soon, right? When the inn was finally searched in 1873, searchers found the cellar caked in blood. The odor was overwhelming. The floor was soaked with years of seepage. Blood had long since hardened into the packed Kansas dirt. There were scores carved into the beams. Unclear if they were tally marks, spirit symbols, or just damage from the trapdoor's mechanics. They found strands of hair, bits of clothing, and scraps of personal belongings that have been missed or discarded. Items that may have belonged to travelers who were never seen again. One item in particular was a blood-stained bonnet, small, likely belonging to a child. Fuck. Evil, bro. Can't be over there killing kids. Come on. The Benders didn't kill everyone, though. They chose victims who were traveling alone. People with little local connection. Men with money, traders, buyers, homesteaders heading west with cash in hand. Sometimes they'd let guests go, especially if they were part of a group or seemed like they'd be missed. This wasn't random madness. It was a survival plan. They robbed and murdered to support their land, their store, and their silence. But eventually, one man disappeared, and that changed everything. All I know is, like, back then, if I was traveling west, I mean, like, gut feelings, dude. Gut feelings exist. And, like, if I'm sitting there or just in the area, and it's just, like I feel like you would be able to look at this joint and be like, nah, I'm good. I'll camp it out, another mile or two down the road. I'm not doing that right here. Nuh-uh, not me, not this guy. My belly, my gut tells me what's up. Dr. William Henry York was a respected physician and Civil War veteran. He had two powerful brothers, one a Kansas state senator and the other a colonel in the U.S. Army. In March of 1873, Dr. York was returning home after helping a young woman in Fort Scott identify a body believed to be her missing husband. On his way back to Independence, Kansas, he never arrived. He was last seen on the Osage Trail, within walking distance of the Bender Inn. When Dr. York failed to return home, his brothers sprang into action. I mean, that's fucked. You're screwed. You're cooked, dude. You killed a dude whose brothers are really powerful? Dude, you got the army coming down on you, bro. You got the army coming down on you. Colonel Ed York led a group of men to search the trail. They stopped at every homestead, including the Bender property. Kate Bender welcomed them. She offered the colonel food and claimed to know nothing of his brother's fate. She even offered a seance, claiming she might be able to help him speak with the missing man. It was a bold move, and it almost worked. But Ed York left uneasy. He later returned with a larger group and began questioning locals. That's when more stories started coming out. About missing travelers, about the odd family north of Cherryvale, about the stench near the orchard. And when the townsfolk went back to the Bender property to search again, the Benders were gone. The search party that returned to the Bender Inn in early May of 1873 found an empty house. The animals were gone, the beds stripped, the family vanished. The searchers, some of them neighbors, some lawmen, began tearing through the cabin looking for answers. That's when they pulled back the rug and discovered the trapdoor. It took several men to lift it. Beneath it, a shallow, claustrophobic cellar reeking of blood and rot. The dirt floor was saturated with old gore. It was so thick and soaked in places that one man vomited from the smell. But there were no bodies in the cellar, so they turned their attention outside. My question now here is, if you're traveling by and you get welcomed into this home and you smell the stink of rotting flesh, how do you not just go, maybe maybe not. Maybe don't be here. That girl must have been pretty as hell back then, like for dudes to just like run that ambition out the window. Behind the cabin was a small orchard. Nothing remarkable, just young trees and tall weeds, but the ground looked wrong, uneven, freshly turned in places. The men began digging, and what they uncovered would earn the Benders their place in infamy. The first body was Dr. William York. His skull was crushed, and his throat slit ear to ear. His boots were still on his feet, and his personal effects, watches, rings, were missing. From there, it was a flood of horror. Man, boots still on the feet, everything. And all they took was a watch and his rings and his money. Some in shallow graves, some with signs of animals having clawed at the surface, some buried side by side, and one buried with a small girl clutched to his side. A father and daughter. The girl's skull had no visible injury. Some believed she had been buried alive. Others thought she died of shock. By the end of the dig, 11 bodies were recovered. And that was just what was found immediately. Many believe there were far more victims and were never found or buried elsewhere. The townsfolk were horrified. Some were enraged. A group of men proposed burning the entire property to the ground. Others wanted to hang anyone who had defended the Benders' innocence. But cooler heads prevailed, at least for the moment. The legend of the Bloody Benders was born, but their story wasn't over. The state of Kansas launched a full-scale manhunt, one of the largest of its kind in the 19th century. Wanted posters were issued with vague, often contradictory descriptions of the Benders. There were no accurate photographs, no fingerprints, no standard identification. The family could have changed clothes and names and simply walked into another town. Some believe they had split up, that John Jr. and Kate went one way and Ma and John Sr. another. Theories abounded. Some claim the Benders boarded a train out of Thayer, Kansas, never to be seen again. Others swore the family had been caught by vigilantes, hanged in secret, and buried in the woods to avoid legal scrutiny. Although I don't know how much scrutiny you're going to get when you murder murderers, serial killers. Especially back then. Back then they'd be like, oh, okay, here's an award, the key to the town. Multiple women over the years claimed to be Kate Bender. Some were arrested and even put on trial, but no conclusive evidence ever emerged. One particularly compelling case involved two women arrested in Michigan in 1889, accused of being Ma and Kate. Handwriting experts were called in. Survivors were summoned to identify them. But after weeks of confusion and conflicting testimony, the charges were dropped. The real Benders were never officially found. They became ghosts in the fog, more rumor than reality. Reports of the Benders, especially Kate, continued for decades. Some said she moved to Colorado and opened a saloon. Oh, that sounds about right for, a spiritual person, just Colorado. On par. Others claimed she became a madam in Texas or Mexico. In 1909, a letter allegedly written by Kate surfaced, claiming she had married and changed her name, but again, there was no proof. By then, most of the people involved in the original case were long dead or had moved on. The Benders had won, not just through murder, but through mystery. After the discovery of the bodies, the Bender property was looted by locals, then abandoned. Some said the land was cursed. Farms built nearby reported poor crop growth. Children claimed to see figures moving at the tree line near the orchard. One family that tried to build a new home on the site gave up after hearing strange sounds under the floor at night. Knocking, scratching, muffled screaming. Whether superstition or guilt, the shadow of the Benders never left Labette County. In Cherryvale and surrounding towns, people began to question how it had gone on so long. How did no one notice? How many travelers had passed through and never been seen again? Some locals insisted that authorities had looked the other way, that neighbors had suspicions but stayed silent, out of fear or indifference. The truth was harder to face. In the lawless sprawl of frontier Kansas, no one was coming to save you. And if you're really thinking about it, like, dude, it was you. It was survival. What you did and what you do all just like played a huge role on whether or not you lived or died in the frontier of Kansas or the Wild West. Over time, the story of the Benders grew more theatrical. Kate, in particular, became the centerpiece of the legend, recast in dime novels and folk tales as a feminine fatale, a seductress who lured men to their deaths with psychic readings and whispers of love. In some versions, she was a witch. In others, a vampire, a ghost, a demon in human form. People said she never aged, that she still roamed the earth, taking new names, new faces, always hunting, that she enjoyed the killing. In 1915, a traveling preacher claimed he had met Kate Bender in San Francisco, said she had confessed to over 30 murders, but the man vanished shortly after the claim. The real Kate Bender was never seen again, but the myth, it only grew stronger. While the term serial killer wouldn't be coined until the 20th century, the Benders fit the profile in every way. They had a preferred method of killing. They were organized and deliberate. Their motives were a blend of greed and psychopathy. They operated over years evading detection, and most chilling, they enjoyed it. Many criminologists and historians place them at the root of America's long, dark fascination with family murders and traveling killers. The kind of archetypes that would later inspire horror films, novels, and urban legends. The Benders weren't just killers. They were the first glimpse of the rot that hides behind civility. The first nightmare that made Americans look twice at the family down the road. And my mom says there's actually a movie. She says it's mid, but she says there's actually a movie which fits exactly the Benders. But yeah, she said it's mid, so don't even worry about it. The question has haunted historians for over 150 years. Did they flee and live quiet lives under new names? Were they hunted down and killed in secret? Did Kate really move west and start again? Or are some of their descendants still alive? In 1992, an amateur historian in Kansas claimed to have found a grave marked only with the initials JB in a field once owned by a descendant of a Bender neighbor. DNA testing was never done. In 2007, a trunk found full of old documents found in a Wichita attic included letters written in German referencing Unser Heim auf den Hügeln, or our home on the hills. Don't come at me if I pronounce all of that German wrong, because it wouldn't surprise me if I did. The handwriting was strikingly similar to the psychic flyers Kate once distributed. But again, no confirmation. Maybe they disappeared forever. Maybe that was the plan all along. Even in the 19th century, people asked the same questions we do now. How did this go on for so long? For real. Like, come on. One theory suggests the Benders weren't just 4 people, but part of a larger ring of killers. Oh, normal theory. They did that with Belgunas too. That others in the community either knew what was happening or helped cover it up, which I doubt. Like, if they all really didn't like her that much, I doubt that. Some neighbors had reportedly noticed the constant disturbances of soil near the orchard, or the awful smell wafting from the Bender's property, which I don't know how you don't notice that, and it raises suspicions. But again, it was a time where literally everybody smelled like dog shit. And yet, no reports were filed. Even more damning, at least 3 victims were later discovered buried on land adjacent to the Bender homestead, but technically not on Bender land. Had someone else been involved? Had neighbors helped hide bodies or bury secrets? Or maybe they just went and buried it out there in the middle of the night and said, fuck it, not our land, not our problem, right? Another theory claims that Kate and John Jr. weren't siblings at all, but lovers, posing as brother and sister to reduce suspicion. A few reports from travelers described flirtatious behavior between the two, or said they shared a bedroom. In a 1-room cabin, they shared a bedroom. Oh no. One abandoned diary, actually that's kind of creepy, you know, when you think about it. Anyway, going on. One abandoned diary, actually, what if they were brother and sister, but because, you know, Kansas, it was incestuous? Gross, dude. Ah, ew, bro. One abandoned diary from a traveler who passed through the inn months before the discovery wrote only, "Charming girl, silent family, slept lightly, left before dawn, bad dreams in that place." I bet. Abandoned diary. Oh, they got him. The Bender case faded over time. As the Wild West gave way to paved road and telegraphs and railroads, the stories turned to myths, the myths to legends. But they never disappeared completely. Books were written, plays performed. Kate Bender became a cultural figure in the American horror landscape. A female killer far ahead of her time, and far more dangerous than any fiction could match. Today, there's nothing left at the house. No foundation, no orchard, no trail. Just wind and stories. Any story that involves a family with a hidden room, a mysterious past, and a quiet house on the edge of nowhere owes a little something to the Benders. They were the prototype. Before Ed Gein, before the Axeman of New Orleans, before H.H. Holmes, there were the Benders, hiding in plain sight. Locals still talk about the land, even generations later. Nothing grows right on this stretch of earth. One farmer in the 1970s tried to plant corn there. Every stalk came up stunted and blackened. Creepy. Another couple attempted to build a mobile home nearby. They moved out within weeks, claiming they heard dragging sounds at night. One morning, they found the words, "No one leaves," carved into the side of their trailer. There's no way to prove it, of course, but people believe it. And in Labette County, Kansas, belief holds weight. So what are we left with? A family that walked into Kansas under false names, built a home on blood, murdered travelers by the dozen, and vanished without a trace. They left No letters, no confessions, and no bodies of their own. Only silence. Some say they got what they deserved. Hunted and hanged in secret by vigilantes who believed justice would never come through courts. Others think they slipped across the border, changed their names, and lived out the rest of their lives surrounded by the very people who once called them neighbors. And then there's a darker theory that they kept killing. That Kate or John Jr., or whoever they really were, just picked a new town, a new house, a new curtain behind which to hide. There's something especially terrifying about the Benders. Not just the murders, not even the number of bodies. It's the ordinariness of it, the quiet, the simplicity. A kitchen table, a smile, a friendly offer of stew. And behind the curtain, death. No lightning, no monsters, no ghost. Just people, just a family, just evil. We like to think we'd know, that we'd feel it, that something would seem off, that we'd sense the danger before sitting down at the table. But the Benders didn't need a curse or a cult or dark god whispering in their ears. They just needed kindness, and patience, and privacy, and a hammer. I guess at the end of the day, when you really think about it, it's kind of like one of those things that, yeah, as I said earlier, like, I feel like my gut would tell me, like, nah, don't do that, and like the smell and everything like that. But then at the same time, it's kind of like, man, you've been traveling for a while. Maybe they offered a free place to stay or something like that, and you're just like, oh, free is better than $1.50, you know, like. So I don't know, man. Back then, yeah, I probably would have fell for it, maybe. Don't know. We'll never know. That was the Bloody Benders. Thank you for watching, and as always, sources are below and now in the credits. Thank you.